Um, yeah, I'm new here, so if you got any questions, just out. Hello? And you have to high school debate to be good at it. So first of all, public forum is like 2-on-2 debate. You have a first speaker, you have a second speaker, and it's going to be people from the same schools team up and they debate against other schools, and they're going to go to tournaments, and these tournaments are usually over the weekend, and whoever wins. There you go. So yeah, it's pretty simple stuff, but it's pretty hard to get good at. So yeah, I'm just gonna run you through that. Wait. Okay, so first of all, PF is all about debating a resolution. And what the resolution is basically just the thing that you should support or the thing that you should negate. It's your side of the debate, basically. So if you're on the affirmative side, you agree with the resolution. If you're on the negative side, you disagree with the resolution. So if the resolution says all illegal drugs should be banned, the outside would be supporting that, and the next side would be not supporting it. And this will be updated every 2 months on the local and national circuits. But if you're a club debater, then it might vary. But if you're just going for high school debate, then yeah, the resolution will be updated every 2 months so that you have a chance to debate a new resolution that's like more fun and just better overall. All right. And let's talk about the format a little bit. So PF is 2-on-2. You have, of course, an app side, an app side, and an next side. So you have 4 speeches. The first speaker is going to cover the first and third speeches, and the second speaker is going to cover the second and fourth speeches. So first speech is your case, is the thing that you read that contains all of your arguments, and that is going to be prepared before the debate starts. So a lot of the time, a debate round is like won without even having the debate started, because one team just has a case that's so much better than the other teams. So debate isn't just about what happens in that room when you debate. Debate is also about research that you have to do and preparation that you have to do before you get started with the round. And so the first speech is going to be the case. The second speech is going to be rebuttal, which is basically the part where you say, Judge, realize that my opponent's arguments are not correct or are untrue because of this, this, and this. This part is basically just you saying that your opponent's arguments are not true and that your arguments are true or factual, and that's what you win. The third speech is the summary, and that's 3 minutes. So the summary basically just, like summary, it's pretty self-explanatory. It summarizes the entire debate, and you basically tell your judge why you're the one winning the debate. And the fourth and last speech is the final focus, and this is what you do. This is where you basically just like give another summary, but this time, instead of summarizing like all the detailed little arguments, you talk about this debate in a grander scale. You say that, Judge, if you agree with us, then the impact will be this. And Judge, if you agree with them, then the impact will be this. This is where you lay out your impacts and say why your impacts are more important than your opponent's impacts. And the impact is basically the answer to the so what question. So someone can say that, for example, bananas are good for your health, which is why people should eat bananas. And so what? And the impact is basically health benefits. So it's like, Judge, realize that you should vote for me because if people eat bananas, they're going to have a healthier life. And the healthier life in that sentence is basically the impact. And the fourth speech is just saying that my impact is better than my opponent's. Any questions till now, Alexa? Okay, I'll take that as a no, I guess. Okay, just if you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out. We're all, real humans, and just don't be afraid. All right, going on to the next one, first speech case. So this is going to be a more detailed run through this speech. So you read stuff, and it's pre-written by yourself or your team. And this is, I think, the part that's toughest in debate, because you have to do a lot of research and you have to read over a lot of sources. But I think that's also where debate is very beneficial, because if you have training through researching other topics, then if you're, for example, writing a school paper or writing a paper for your school newspaper or something like that, where just writing homework assignment, doing research is going to be a lot easier for you, because you already have such good experience in research. And usually this has 1 to 3 contentions, and contentions are basically just a fancy word for points, for arguments. So contention 1 is going to be, you should eat bananas because they're good for your health. Contention 2 is going to be, you should eat bananas because they taste good. Contention 3 is going to be you should eat bananas because they're cheap and they're a good replacement for oranges that are expensive. So these are going to be 3 contentions, which is basically the 3 things that you're arguing for that you think are going to win you the round. And yeah, like I said, like it says here, this is what wins you the round. Your case is what wins you the round. You can be a perfect debater, you have perfect logic, perfect rebuttals, perfect everything. But if you don't have a case, then you're not going to win a single round. Okay, so let's talk about contention. So what makes a good contention? A good contention has a claim, it has evidence, it has a warrant, which is basically how your evidence supports your claim, and lastly, it has an impact. So, for example, the contention of you should eat bananas because they're good for your health. Your claim is that you should eat bananas because they're good for your health. Your evidence is that, according to it's not an actual study, but just for example, according to a study done by Harvard University, bananas are good for health. That's your evidence. Okay. And your warrant is just going to be judge realized that because Harvard University said that bananas are good for your health, that means bananas are good for your health. That's how your evidence connects to your claim. That's how your evidence supports your claim. And lastly, you have the impact, which is basically saying, like I said before, why it matters. Why do we care if our health is better? In this case, in this contention, it's very clear. We should always seek to have better health because we can live longer, and we all want to live longer. But for other contentions, it may be more complicated. For example, why should we stop globalization, or why should we allow illicit drugs, or something like that? You have to demonstrate to a judge why your argument matters, and the impact is why you win. If you have a perfectly constructed argument without an impact, then you're not going to win this argument, because the judge isn't going to care about this argument, because they don't know why they should care about the argument. So a good contention is to have all 4: claim, evidence, warrant, and impact. Right. Moving on to the second speech, rebuttal. So in this speech, you read some stuff, and this stuff is called block. So basically, this is also just a Word document with all of the answers to anticipated contentions that you think your opponent is going to read. So this is also pre-written. A lot of times blocks are really, really helpful because you don't have all the evidence stored in your head. You don't have all the answers to their arguments stored in your head. And having a block file is really going to help you when you are doing your rebuttal. And you can basically just read directly from the block file. And a lot of the times you just annihilate your opponent's arguments. So the rebuttal is basically where you respond to your opponent's contentions and you say why the contention doesn't make sense. Whoops. And realize that rebuttals are important, but rebuttals are a reason why your opponent doesn't win the round. It's not a reason why you win. It's just a reason why they do not win. So you have to have a good case and a good rebuttal to say that if you have the greatest rebuttal speech of all time, but you have no case, you're not going to win this debate. There are many techniques that go into having a good rebuttal speech, and these techniques including questioning the source, asking for a card, questioning the warrant, delinking their argument, turning the warrant, turning the impact, and so I'm just going to go down this one. So first of all, you can question their source. For example, their source can be Harvard University. Their source can also be a random source that you've never heard of. Okay, so you can basically tell the judge, realize that my opponent's source is blah, blah, blah.com. Judge, realize that blah, blah, blah.com isn't really credible because they have used multiple false reports or something like that. You can question their source and say that their source is incredible, which is why the evidence is incredible. And you can also question the warrant, which is the link between their evidence and their claim. You can say that judge realized that my opponent's evidence says this, however, that doesn't necessarily support the claim. For example, going back to the banana. If your opponent says that you should eat bananas because they're good for health, but their evidence says bananas are really good, bananas taste really good. And you can just say like, judge realized that my opponent's evidence does not support the claim because their evidence talks about how good bananas taste, but their claim talks about bananas' impact for your health. These two have no relationship whatsoever. It doesn't make sense. And then you can also turn the warrant, and you can also turn your impact, which is basically saying that judge realized that my opponent's evidence or my opponent's claim or my opponent's impact actually flow to my side, which basically means that your opponent's impacts are actually supporting your side. This is really hard to do. This is probably the hardest thing in debate to just come up with on the spot, but always read a turn you can, because you're not only taking away your opponent's arguments, you're adding them to your arguments at the same time. So turns are really, really important, and they're also really, really powerful. And then of course you can overpower them with your own evidence. You can have your own evidence that you research that says that says something like Harvard University or Stanford University also stated that bananas are not good for you. Bananas are actually bad for you. You can basically just overpower their evidence with your own evidence, and that basically also takes away the argument. And again, realize that rebuttal is simply why they do not win. Having the rebuttal doesn't make it around having a good case. All right. Any questions about that? Okay. Okay. I have a question for you. Can you give me one of the different parts of a good argument, of a good contention? One of the four that I mentioned. Hello? Okay. Just give me one. Okay. If you can, that's fine, but I really hope that you're like taking notes and stuff so you can actually get something from this presentation instead of just coming here and attending and just doing nothing with it. So let's go on with the third speech, which is summary. So the summary is why you win the round, and that's where you tell the judge realize that I win this round because I win the argument of this, I win the argument that, and I win the argument this. So I win argument 1, I win argument 2, and I win argument 3. However, judge realized that my opponent doesn't win a single one of their arguments. So judge, overall, you should buy my side of the flow and you should vote. The third speech is where you tell your judge why you win. And the third speech is also very important because you can have a great rebuttal, you can have a great case, but if you do not articulate your arguments well, you do not articulate the flow of logic well, then the judge isn't going to know who to vote for. This is the place where you articulate your arguments clearly again and you clarify the round for your judge, because a lot of times the judges are just parent judges. They probably don't understand your evidence. They probably didn't get much on the flow on their notes. So You have to tell them why. If you don't tell them, they're just going to assume that you didn't. And this is where you explain your link chain to the judge, which is basically your whole string of warrants. This is where you explain your different arguments, you take them apart, and you tell the judge, realize that my evidence leads to this. My opponent tries to say that my evidence doesn't lead to this, but my evidence actually does lead to this, which is why, judge, this is true. And then you tell the judge, this is true, and this is very important, because if this is true, we can do this. For example, if we eat bananas, if eating bananas is true, then we can have better health. So that's where you tell the judge like how to work, why you work. And then you also explain your opponent's link chain to the judge, and tell your judge why their link chain doesn't work. So basically say like, judge, my opponent tries to say that we shouldn't eat bananas because they taste bad. However, judge, realize that having better health is more important than eating something that tastes good, which is why, judge, you should prefer having better health than eating something that tastes good. So this is where you tell the judge either why their argument doesn't work, or either why your argument is better than their argument. And you have to cover both sides of the flow, which basically means you have to cover your own side. You have to defend your own side from your opponent's offense and your arguments, and you also have to attack your opponent's arguments. All right, so why is all right, so some summary techniques. So first of all, you have to collapse. And I know the word sounds really bad, but collapsing is really, really important. Collapsing basically means focusing on one contention. So a lot of the times you're going to have 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 contention. But the thing that you have to do in your summary is focusing on one contention. So the way you're going to achieve this is say something like, judge, I am going to focus on contention 1, and realize that contention 1 is the most important contention throughout this entire debate, because I can save lives because I can save lives through giving people better health. So you have to focus on one contention that you like the most, that you think has the most impact, that you think gives you the most chance to win. And that's basically what collapsing is. And then you can also use a off-time roadmap. And basically what an off-time roadmap is before you start your speech, you tell your judge who you're going to go over through the speech. Like, judge, before I start my speech, I'm going to give you an off-time roadmap. So throughout the speech, I'm going to cover my side of the flow and defend my arguments, and I'm going to go over my opponent's side of the flow as well and attack their arguments. And last of all, judge, I will show you when my arguments are better than theirs, which is why I'm winning round. Just something like that. So if the judge has this, then they can organize their own notes and they can understand your arguments better, and they can basically just comprehend your entire speech better. And third of all, clash points. So clash points are basically where the debate is most heated, where the most time is spent on throughout this debate. So maybe you and your opponent spent 3 minutes arguing about one contention, but spent half a minute arguing a second contention. So the clash point is going to be the first contention, because you spent the most time on the first contention. You spend the most energy on the first contention. So for clash points, this is where the judge is. This is how the judge knows who's winning the debate, because that's where the clash between you and your opponent is the most clear, and and so the judge has a clear way to tell who's the better debater and who's the better team. So you have to tell the judge why you win clash points. Just say something like, judge, the first clash point throughout this 2-day round is whether bananas are actually good for your health. I win this clash point because I proved to you that bananas are good for your health throughout my Harvard research paper. So basically, you just tell your judge why you win the clash point, and if you tell your judge that, your judge will most likely think that, oh look, this kid, this debater, he can tell me that his arguments are better, so he must be the better debater, which is why I must vote for him. And clash points are also just basically you telling the judge why you win. So anything after the rebuttal is basically you telling your judge why you win today's round. All right, Alexa, I'm going to ask you again. You still have no questions? Not a single one? Oh, okay. Okay. So going on to the fourth speech, the final focus, the FF. So this is where you crystallize. And crystallize is basically making the process of making something muddy into making something clear and easy to see through. So this is where you're going to just flesh out the entire debate, tell your judge, I win this debate. And this is where you weigh your impact. So you tell your judge, realize that my impact of better health is more important than my opponent's impact of tasting better, because judge realized that when you can live longer, you can eat other food that tastes good for a longer period of time, which is why judge, you should vote for me, because living longer is more important. That's impact weighing. That's basically telling your judge why your impact is more important than your opponent's impact. Impact weighing is extremely important because sometimes you can have just one argument, but if you can make sure that the judge knows that this one argument has a bigger impact than all your opponent's 3 arguments combined, you can still win this debate. You can also do a world comparison that's going to show the judge more directly what your world and your opponent's world will look like. You can say something like, judge, realize that in my world, people are going to eat bananas, which is why they're going to be more healthy, which is why they can live longer. However, judge, in my opponent's world, people are not going to eat bananas, which is why people are not healthy. They're going to live shorter. They're going to have worse health. People are going to die more often, and that's bad because nobody wants to die. Which is why I should win this debate, because my world is better than my opponent's world. You basically paint out 2 scenarios and tell the judge why your scenario is the better scenario than your opponent's scenario. And the fourth speech is also why you win. You have to tell the judge that you are better than your opponent, because that's how you're going to win this debate. You do not win debate rounds by having better arguments. You win the debate round by telling your judge that you are the better debater, that you are the person that they should vote for. And you have to do that through basically saying why you're better than your opponent. You cannot simply say that you're good. You have to say that you're better. Yeah. And then we go to Crossfire. So Crossfire is basically a series of questions that you can ask your opponent after each speech. So there are different styles of Crossfire questions. You have gotcha questions, which is basically you set a trap and you lead your opponent into contradicting themselves after answering a series of questions. This is really hard. Only the most advanced debaters can do this. So don't be worried if you can't do this on your first day of debate. Second style of Crossfire questions is basically gathering information about your opponent's case so that you can better dismantle their arguments in your rebuttal and your summary. So basically, you can say something like, opponent, you say that bananas are good for your health because they have this kind of vitamin, for example. Why is that true? You can ask your opponent about the link between their evidence and their impact. You can ask your opponent about their own warrant and their own logic. And a lot of the times you're going to catch your opponent off guard. Not a lot. It depends on, for example, if you're a novice, if it's your first year of debate, then you can just ask your opponent that. And then a lot of the times your opponent is going to sometimes not even know their own argument. They're just going to say so the reason why this is true is because there's vitamin, and if there's vitamin, there's health, and then you follow up saying that why is it that people have better health when they have more vitamin, and then sometimes they don't even know their own argument, and that's really beneficial for you, because when the judge sees your opponent stuttering when answering one of your questions, the judge will know that you're the dominant debater in the round. The judge will know that you're the better debater in the round. The judge will also see your confidence, and the judge will see your opponent's lack of confidence, and the judge will just agree to themselves that you're a better debater and that they should vote for you. Crossfire is extremely important because it's the only point in the debate where you can have a direct interaction with your opponent. Not throughout your speeches, you're simply giving your speeches in turn. The Crossfire section is the only place where you can actually ask your opponent questions and talk to them. And you have to use this opportunity to show the judge why you're a more dominant debater. Right. And last of all, we have flowing. So flowing is is basically a fancy word for taking notes, and you record and write down what your opponent said so that you can remember what to attack during your rebuttal. So if you don't flow, you are going to lose unless you're Albert Einstein. But of course, you're not. So you have to write down flows. Flows are extremely important because if you do not have flows, you do not have their notes, you do not know what they said, you're not going to memorize everything that they said, which is why you're going to have a extremely horrible rebuttal because you are not going to know what to attack. So you have to flow. A tip that I have for you in terms of flowing is using two different colors. So use a red and use a black, for example, or use a red and use a blue. If it's one of your own argument, you write it down with blue. If it's your opponent's argument, write it down with the red pen. So you know what's your argument, you know what's your opponent's argument, and you know what to attack in rebuttal. And also use abbreviations. For example, two months ago, the topic for PF debate was should workers have the right to strike? And instead of writing down right to strike, which takes a long time, you can just write down RTS. And if you know what that means, it's going to save you a lot of time when you are flowing because your opponent are going to be talking at an extremely fast pace like this, which is why if you do not flow, if you do not use abbreviations, you're going to get lost. So in debate rounds, your opponents are going to talk extremely fast and you have to use abbreviations, else you're not going to catch up with their speed. And you also have prep time, which is basically just the time that you can use, the optional time that you can use to prepare your speech before your speech. It is in the round, you have 4 minutes total, and you use it before rebuttal, summary, and final focus, because that's when you're going to have to come up with new stuff to say during the debate round. And do not write down your full speech during your prep time. Do not write down every word that you're going to say. Just write down key points that you're going to follow so that it saves time and you can prep for more things that you're going to say. And then most importantly, you have topic preparation, which is something that you're going to do with your team. And I'm going to go less into that because you're going to have your own high school team if you do end up doing debate in your high school. And trust me, your teams are really, really supportive. They're going to help you out if you're a freshman, if you're a novice. So you don't have to worry about that. However, realize that you always have to engage in topic preparation because if someone else does your research for you, you're not going to actually understand your own case. So make sure that you understand your case. People can help you do research, but make sure that you understand how your case works. What's the most important point? What's the point that you like the most? How to defend, everything like that. And lastly, just a short rundown of different circuits, which is basically like different levels of debate. So you have local debate, you have nationals, you have the NSDA finals, and then lastly, you have the tournament of champions. So locals is basically what you're going to end up doing, Alexa, next year in high school. It's just going to be your high school debating against like 10 or 11 other high schools in your own city. You're going to go to this one high school, and then you're just going to debate it out for 4 rounds. Whoever has the most amount of wins at the end of the day is going to win the tournament. And then you also have nationals, which is like harder tournaments, and national tournaments usually have bids to TOC. And a bid is basically like a qualifying ticket. If you have 2 bids, then you can qualify to the tournament of champions. And then you also have NSDA final, which is just a tournament in June every single year. You have the national qualifier tournament. If you end up getting top 2 at one of those tournaments, then you can qualify to the NSDA national finals. So, yep. And then of course you also have your state debate tournament, but that varies from state to state. The time varies. So I don't know which state you live in, so I can't give you much detail on that. Yep. And good luck in your career. And yeah, I hope you end up doing debate next year. So you have questions? Where? Oh, and Rosalind.